All right, hello guys. Today we're talking all about how Mountaineer can get strong without putting on extra muscle. Now, this is an incredibly important subject for a Mountaineer to get their head around, mainly for the fact that 95% of mountaineers that I see on the internet and that I speak to on a daily basis do not understand this core concept. And it leads them to either be skipping out on their strength training because they're wary of putting on extra muscle, which they have to drag up the mountain, or doing some really inefficient strength training in which they're not getting the full potential benefits of this training and they're really shooting themselves in the foot. So today we're going to be exploring in detail this subject around the common myths around this particular subject and how a mountaineer can really apply smart training principles to get themselves incredibly strong for the mountain and not have to worry about putting on extra muscle. So basically, this is something I see pretty much every day, this statement here. And they say, I am weight training with a light weight and more repetitions as I don't need to be dragging excess muscle mass up the mountain. This is something I see from mountaineers all the time, and it just drives me absolutely mental because this statement couldn't be more far from the truth. And not only is it incredibly incorrect, but it's also a detrimental to your potential performance on the mountain if you're going down this approach. And it just really does boil my blood if you haven't noticed already. So today we're going to explore this in a little bit more detail. As I said, this approach is wrong. When it comes to being on the mountain, strength development is incredibly beneficial, not just muscular endurance, which mountaineers do need, and it's incredibly important for them, but developing maximal strength as well. Now, the reason why strength development is so beneficial comes down to 4 big reasons for mountaineers, 5 even potentially. Number 1 is strength development is the single best thing you can do to prevent both overuse and acute injuries. Number 2, increasing your maximal strength improves your movement economy, meaning for every single step that you take and every single move that you make on the mountain, you're going to be using less energy, which is incredibly beneficial. Number 3, it improves your movement speed, meaning that you can hike at a quicker pace for longer without getting as tired. And number 4, it just makes everything feel easier. And then potentially number 5, or definitely number 5, having a better maximal strength base greatly increases the effectiveness of your muscular endurance training. Now, if you want to learn that in a little bit more detail and dive into the actual reasons behind that, the science behind that, I've done another video lecture on that particular subject, so you can have a look at that. But if you're not training strength properly, you're not going to be getting these benefits. Meaning, if you're doing just moving weights around, you're doing lots of repetitions with light weight, you're not applying structure to your training, you're shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to strength development, and you're not going to be getting these benefits. Sure, you're going to be working and you're going to be adding training into your week, but is it really going to be worth your time? And it is possible, which I'm going to explain in detail today, to get huge improvements in your strength and in your maximal strength without putting on any extra weight and not putting on a single kilo of extra weight, which you have to carry around the mountain. And that's what I'm going to tell you exactly how to do today. So going over the sort of frame for today, what we're going to be looking at is number 1, why only doing low load, high rep strength work is a mistake. Number 2, why not all strength development comes from muscle growth, even though that's what people first think when they think about getting stronger. And a number of phenomena which absolutely prove that this is the case. Number 3, we're going to explore 2 different mechanisms of strength development. And we're going to really look at the number one, which our mountaineers really want to be aiming for. We're going to be looking at different training principles you need to stick to get mountain strong without putting on a kilo of extra muscle. And then we're going to also explore what to do if you're one of the lucky or unlucky few, depending on your perspective, of if you literally look at a weight and you put on muscle. What can you do in that situation to develop maximal strength without putting on that unwanted muscle? So in the end of this, you're going to really understand why this training myth is wrong and how to best apply strength training in your preparations to get the best benefit on the mountain, because that is the crucial thing. So first of all, I want to explore this. Sticking to low load, high rep strength work, this is 100% a mistake if you're trying to develop your maximal strength. Yes, low load, high repetition strength work is beneficial and it's effective for muscular endurance training, which needs to be part of your preparation if it's applied in the right way. But that's not what we're exploring today. We're exploring maximal strength in regards to those 5 benefits I talked about previously and why you need to develop it. So strength is best developed with high load exercise. So maximal strength, you need to apply a certain amount of force to stimulate the body to adapt. It's pretty common sense. I'm not going to dive into this too detailed because there's so much evidence. It's pretty much common sense, but we'll explore a couple of papers really, really briefly just to give you an understanding around this. So number one, the first paper is looking at the difference between heavy versus moderate loads on strength. Basically, they looked at comparing 2 to 4 repetitions per set versus 8 to 12 repetitions per set. They trained for 8 weeks. Results showed that there was much greater increases in their strength compared when they were doing the heavy loads, so the 2 to 4 loads, compared to moderate loads, which was the 8 to 12 repetitions. So that's, more or less saying heavy loads are going to develop better strength. Interestingly, it was saying that greater increases in lateral thigh thickness, muscle thickness, which was extra muscle mass, were noted with the moderate loads versus the heavy. So already this is also saying with the heavy loads, you're not going to get quite as much muscles development as you are if you're going to stick in those 8 to 12 repetitions. So that's good to know. The next study looks at the effects of low load versus high load resistance training. This one looked at the difference between 25 to 35 repetitions, and also 8 to 12. So it classifies 8 to 12 here as high load, but in all honesty, that's just moderate load. So I'm going to be talking through moderate load when I'm talking through this example. But they looked at the difference between those and see what happened. Basically, this one showed that high load training was superior for maximizing strength adaptations. So in this study, it's saying 8 to 12 repetitions is better than 25 to 35 repetitions for developing maximal strength. Beauty. If we go back to the other one, it was saying 2 to 4 repetitions is better than 8 to 12. So in conclusion, heavy loads are best for developing maximal strength. Now, interesting in this, if you look at these second last sentence down the bottom, these findings indicate that both high load, moderate load in this case, and low load training to failure can elicit significant increases in muscle hypertrophy as well. Meaning, if you're doing 25 to 35 repetitions, low load, high repetition weight, and you're training in a way which you're reaching failure, where you're getting tired and you really, really can't do any more repetitions, you're still putting yourself at risk of increasing your muscle mass. Very, very important, and already busting that myth if that's sticking to low load, high rep strength work so you don't have to lug extra muscle around the mountain. That is a very important point, and I want you to really, really, really consider that. So what we're basically saying is muscle hypertrophy can happen at high repetitions, moderate repetitions, and muscle strength is best developed at low repetitions. Pretty straightforward, and hopefully you can get your head around that. So now we want to explore about developing muscle strength. So it is absolutely impossible to say that strength development only comes from muscle gain. So the first thing you first think about, yes, and it sort of makes common sense, bigger muscles equals more force and make more strength. Yes, it is common sense, but it is impossible to say the two are exclusively linked. Now, there are a number of known phenomena which clearly show this is not the case. And we're going to explore these just so you can get your head around that muscle mass does not always have to equal strength, or the other way around. So number one is mental imagery. So this is basically using visualization and imagery without any physical training and showing that that can improve strength. Now, there's a huge number of studies that have shown people literally just imagining themselves lifting weights. They don't even touch a weight at all. If they do that for a few weeks and then test their actual strength, they improve their strength purely from imagining things. So that's saying, look, if you're imagining stuff, there's not going to be any changes to your muscles. You're not going to get bigger. You're not going to put on mass, but you can get stronger. So what's going on there? There's a huge amount of studies on this. This review sort of looked at, looked at 639 articles, but it came down to 6 that were included for review, which they deemed worthy. They basically looked at muscle strength developments through the fingers, the quadriceps, the elbow flexors, the ankle dorsi, and plantar flexors. And they literally looked at mental imagery. And they said that mental imagery can increase strength greater than a control group, meaning if you don't do anything, greater than a control group. But not to say that this will ever replace physical training, because that's not going to be as effective. But it just goes to show mental imagery is going to improve your strength. So what's going on there? It's not muscle mass, it's not extra weight, but you can improve your strength. The next example here is something that's known as the crossover effect, which is basically this phenomenon which is shown if you train one limb at a time. So if you literally train one arm or literally train one leg and never do a thing on the other leg, you can increase the strength in the untrained limb. Studies here, basically they looked at 16 studies, and it showed that if you train one arm, you can improve, or one limb, you can improve the other side, so the untrained limb, by about half the strength improvements of the other side. So it's literally saying the side that you train with the weights and you put the resistance in, that's going to improve, but the other side is going to improve half as much. So it's not as good, but it shows something else is going on because the muscle mass is not increasing, the muscle mass is not changing, but you're getting stronger. And then there's a few other points to consider. Children. Children can do a huge amount of strength training, but not get any changes to their muscle mass. And they can get a huge amount of extra strength and extra power and extra force, but their muscle mass rarely changes. What's going on there? Same thing with women. Most women really do struggle to put on muscle mass. However, they can greatly and phenomenally increase their strength through strength training. So what's going on there? And then also, you've probably done this in the past and you've probably experienced this yourself. Like if you've ever experienced, say you've done a bodybuilding program, whether you were younger, or if you just pulled something off the internet. And when I say bodybuilding program, I mean, it's like 10 exercises, 3 sets of 12, yada, 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 something like that. You've probably noticed in the first few weeks, you get stronger, but your body hasn't changed. Your muscle isn't increasing, but you're already getting stronger and putting on extra weight. So what is going on there? The only logical conclusion from all of this is strength development is not exclusively linked to muscle growth, meaning there's 100% opportunity for you to get strong without putting on extra weight. You have to lug up the mountain. That's the only conclusion. There's so much science, there's so much evidence behind that, and there really is no arguing that. So I hope that sort of gives you some insight into that. Now I want to explore 2 different areas of strength development. One that you're probably familiar with, one that you may not be so familiar with. The first area one is literally that what we've been talking about, putting on muscle size. Functional hypertrophy basically means making your muscles bigger so they can exert more force. Everyone sort of gets that, and that's one mechanism of getting stronger. Basically what it involves is increases the number and size of your myofibrils, which are basically the contractile tissue in your muscles. If you look at this picture here, the initial muscle is like so. You do a bit of strength training, and then basically those myofibrils get bigger, there's more of them, and then your muscle cell gets bigger. Pretty straightforward. More myofibrils, they're contractile fibers, equal more force, meaning you can produce more force, you're stronger, and that's relatively good. For mountaineers, this generally isn't what we want. We don't really want this type of strength development because, as we said, we don't want extra weight, we don't want extra kilos lugging up on the mountain. So this is generally something we want to avoid. The only situation where this might be relevant for you is if you've got a bit of an off season, say you train 8 months leading into a big adventure and you've got 4 months where you might not be doing specific training for mountaineering, might be worthwhile putting on a little bit extra muscle mass. So then when you lose your muscle mass going forward, you don't like go into super skinny mode. Some people prefer that. Some mountaineers do that. And also in the situation of a rehab. So if you've injured something and you're coming back from injury, more than likely you've lost muscle mass and you need to put it back on to help that rehab and help that stability and everything. So you might be looking at something like this here. Now, the other situation here is on the far right is what's known as non-functional hypertrophy, in which the muscles get bigger without you actually getting stronger. And what happens here is just the stuff floating around in the muscles get bigger. So it looks like you're bigger, but you're not increasing your strength. And then obviously this is by far the thing we really want to avoid as a mountaineer, because that stuff is useless. That's just going to weigh us down and not even give us that benefit of added strength as well. So in general, we want to avoid functional hypertrophy as a mountaineer, but we also definitely want to avoid that non-functional hypertrophy as well. So that was one mechanism of strength development. Bigger muscles, more strength. Pretty straightforward. Most mountaineers are familiar with that, but we don't want to be doing that. What we want to be doing is something that's called neural development. Basically, this involves improving the connection between your brain and your muscles. Now, your brain is an incredibly powerful thing. And if you can train this connection and you can make it more efficient, more powerful, you can increase your strength, improve your performance on the mountain, and that is going to be incredibly effective for you. The beauty of this is there's no weight between, the connection between your brain and your muscles. That's not going to weigh you down. So you can get outrageously, incredibly, and really amazingly strong without doing a thing to increase your muscle size. And that's what a mountaineer really wants to be looking at. Now, this can happen. There's a whole bunch of theories behind this. It's not entirely understood, but this is a general outline of what's thought to be going on. There's probably a few other bits and pieces here, but as a general outline, this will do for us. Number one, what happens is when you're doing strength training in a very particular way, you improve what's known as intramuscular adaptation, which is basically the synchronization between the fibers of the same muscle to generate their strength simultaneously. So if we go back to this picture here, if you took all these muscle fibers and if they're all firing off at different times, when you're trying to do a given task, you're not going to be able to apply as much force and show as much strength. However, if they're trained to all go at the same time and be really, really efficient and really, really fire at the same time, that means you can apply more force, you can show more strength, and there's going to be benefits on the mountain. So that's what strength training does in the intramuscular adaptation, and that synchronization gets better. Second thing is something known as intermuscular adaptation. So this is the synchronization between different muscles involved in an action. So this comes down in two situations, which I'll break down. Number one, the working muscles for a given movement. So the example here is if you're doing, say, a squat in the gym, or you're doing a step on the mountain with a pack on your back, your quads, your glutes, and your hamstrings are all going to be working together. Now, if you can go through strength training, you can develop it in the gym. Basically, those muscles get more efficient and more effective at working together as a team. Instead of them working a little bit disjointed, they get really, really efficient working together, meaning they can exert more strength, produce more force, and give you benefits on the mountain. Number two is it improves something called reciprocal inhibition, which is basically all your muscle groups are broken down to an agonist and an antagonist. Or whenever you do a movement, you got an agonist and an antagonist muscle. The agonist is the muscle that actually produces the movement. The antagonist is the opposing muscle group to that muscle producing the movement. So to break this down, I know that's a little bit confusing. Biceps. If you're doing a bicep curl, your agonist is your bicep. That's actually doing the movement, but your antagonist is on the opposite end of that. And what that does is that sort of controls the force and slows down the force production of your agonist, mainly because the brain is a little bit worried that, like, if you put too much force and produce too much force, you're going to hurt yourself. So what you can do is, while you're strength training, you're teaching the brain, look, it is safe to exert this force. I can handle this. My body can handle this. The inhibition that comes from the antagonist muscle doesn't happen quite as much. So that tricep stops getting in the way of the bicep producing force, and it can get stronger, 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 stronger. And the tricep does less and less and less inhibition. A little bit technical there, but it makes sense. And it happens in every single arm movement in the body. There's always agonist and antagonist muscles going on. So if you can get rid of that antagonist, really reducing your force, you can get stronger. And then finally, there's something that's known as a decrease in muscle fiber sensitivity, which basically means your muscles need less of a stimulus to recruit more fibers faster. So if you can recruit more fibers at any given time, you don't need this huge, outrageous, maximal producing force. You can just take a step and use more muscle fibers. You're going to be stronger. They're going to fatigue less, and it's going to be good. Really, really simple. There is a lot more that goes into that. And if you get real sciencey, more sciencey than I just did, you can dive into it, but that gives us a pretty decent idea. So this neural development is something that's essential for a mountaineer to develop. And this is something that's going to give you so many incredible gains in strength and so many improvements on the mountain and also in your training without putting any extra weight. And that's what we want to be focusing on. So how can we target neural strength adaptations without hypertrophy? So what can you as a mountaineer do in the gym to get these neural strength adaptations without the extra hypertrophy and extra muscle mass that you don't want? And it is pretty straightforward. There are some very specific principles you need to follow, which you can get your way around this. So number one, every single strength exercise you do when you're doing your max strength training, well, not every single one, the majority of your major strength exercises, I should say. So your squats, your step ups, your deadlifts, your single leg deadlifts, your glute bridges, all of that jazz. You want to be hitting 2 to 6 repetitions, meaning you want to be choosing a weight in which you could, you want to be doing 2 to 6 repetitions. We don't need to explain that too much more. If you're getting between 6 and 8, you might be creeping into the functional hypertrophy where you're putting a little extra muscle mass on. If you're getting the 10 to 12, you might be getting into that, a little bit more hypertrophy, and even 15 or more has been shown to having hypertrophy. But this 2 to 6 is going to be the best place for you to sit. Now, this obviously has to be balanced with the fact that you don't want to be putting too much weight on too soon. So if you're inexperienced, you're obviously going to work your way down to that. But for the majority of your max strength training, you should be sitting 2 to 6 repetitions. On top of this, you need to be doing high rest, meaning you want to be having 2 minutes as a minimum between sets of an exercise. Now, the idea behind this is I haven't got any science to back up here, but it's pretty commonly known in the training world. Lower rest, when you're looking at 90 seconds, 60 seconds rest, you're going to be detrimental for your strength development, meaning you're not going to get the most out of it. And it also can pre-fatigue muscles. They don't recover properly, and that can stimulate the hypertrophy a little bit more. So you want to be looking at 2 minutes or more in between sets of an exercise. Now, if you don't know how to put this together in a workout and you're just thinking, I've got to squat, have 2 minutes rest, squat, have 2 minutes rest, squat, 2 minutes rest, and move on to another exercise, the old school bodybuilding approach, and you don't know how to make this a little bit more efficient, I've got another video on sequencing and structuring your warm-ups, watch that. It'll give you a very good insight into how you can actually use this to your advantage and use your rest periods to your advantage in your training and not waste your time. So have a look at that if you haven't already. Next one, low volume. So what I mean by low volume is basically volume is the amount of work you do in a session. So how many repetitions times how much weight. Volume is the number one key indicator of hypertrophy. And when it comes down to rep ranges, when it comes down to fatigue, when it comes down to all of this, volume is so much more important, and that's something you really, really want to control. So basically, the main thing here is you don't want to train like a bodybuilder, meaning you don't want to be doing 8, 9, 10, 12 sets of a particular exercise. You don't want to be doing 10 sets per workout on the same muscle group. You really, really want to be limiting that to maybe 4 to 6 to maybe 8 if you're super, super, super experienced. So what I mean by this is, you know, many people have been in the gym, and many mountaineers still do this, and they'll go in and they'll do 3 sets of squats, 3 sets of leg press, 3 sets of lunges, 3 sets of step ups, 3 sets of leg extensions. It's mental, and they do so much work which they don't need to be doing to develop their strength, but all this extra work and all this extra volume is going to be a really, really big signaler of hypertrophy. Alternatively, what they'll do is they'll do maybe squats and lunges, but they'll do 6 sets of each, and they'll do so much work on those particular muscle groups. And again, that's too much work, and well, not too much work, that's going to signal hypertrophy. Or alternatively, week by week, they might do 4 sets one week, 5 sets another week, 6 sets another week. And as we're getting more and more volume, that's going to be a signal as well. So you really need to be controlling your volume and ideally doing the lowest volume for the best gains of strength. You need to find the balance there. Now, this is a little bit tricky to find for some people, and everyone's going to vary individual to individual. So it is a little bit of playing around. But generally, what you're looking at, this is a massive review of a whole bunch of different stuff, looking at the best strength development for the lowest volume, and what the best is that balance between doing too much volume and not enough volume to get your strength. And basically what it said, if you're completely untrained, you can get a really, really good strength response doing 3 days a week, 4 sets per muscle group at 60% of your RM, 1 RM. So you don't need to do a huge amount of load. You're basically doing 4 sets per muscle group per workout. So that'll be on Monday, you do 4 sets of squats. On Wednesday, you do 4 sets of lunges. On Friday, you do 4 sets of step-ups. That'll be enough for your strength development. That'll be really effective. But recreationally trained non-athletes, so someone who's got a relatively, average experience in the weights room, they're going to be seeing the maximal strength gains with an intensity of 80% of their 1 RM or more, 2 days a week, and a mean volume of 4 sets on per muscle group per day. So what that means is, again, you're going to do 2 days of training. Monday, you might do 4 sets of squats. Wednesday, you might do 4 sets of step-ups. And that's enough if you're training at the right intensity to simulate your strength development. And then for athletic populations, so someone who's done really, really, really quite a bit of training in their life and they're pretty experienced, they're going to be looking at 85% or more, 2 days a week with a mean volume of 8 sets per muscle group. So that might be on Monday, you might do 4 sets of squats, 4 sets of step-ups. On Wednesday, you might do 4 sets of squats, 4 sets of step-ups. And then that'll be your maximal strength. This is going to vary between individual to individual. So these aren't hard and fast rules, but it gives you an idea between, you don't need outrageously huge amounts of volume and outrageously huge amounts of work on one particular muscle group to get strength development, which many, many people still do and many people are unfamiliar with. Small amount of training at a good intensity with the right exercises is going to give you much better strength development without the associated muscle gain. Moving on. Next one, don't go to failure. So when you're getting to the stage where you're going, and you get to the point where you literally can't do any more repetitions, that is a stimulator of hypertrophy. A little bit of argument there in the science world, but it's pretty accepted. A lot of people say if you hit failure, you're going to find extra hypertrophy. As we saw in one of the original studies, people doing 35 repetitions, but hitting failure at the end, which a lot of people do with their muscular endurance work, leads to hypertrophy. So what you want to do is always leave 1 or 2 reps in the tank. You never want to hit that muscular failure. You always want to be able to, have a little bit left in the tank. So if you were doing these low repetitions and you were doing, say, 4 repetitions, you want to be choosing a weight in which you would fail at about 6 repetitions, meaning you can do 4 repetitions quite happily, go bang, 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 but you wouldn't be able to do any more than 6. That means you're getting enough weight, enough stimulus to hit that particular strength development, but you're not hitting failure. Very, very important. Rolling off this, more or less the same concept is you never want to miss a repetition in your strength training. Now, this is really, really good for strength development, meaning every time you say do a squat and you can't literally get yourself up and you fail and you need a spotter or you need, to bail out of the exercise, whatever, that's going to be detrimental to your long-term health, long-term strength development. Your body's going to realize, hey, that's too much for me. It's going to start trying to protect itself. It's going to start limiting your strength. So if you can go your entire training without ever missing a repetition, you're never going to hit that failure point where you're going to add on to that hypertrophy, and you're never going to have that detrimental effect to your strength. So very, very important. And the final bit is probably you could do a whole lecture on this, and this is incredibly important for any mountaineer who does struggle with weight gain, particularly for the people who do have a history of putting on muscle, is you need to be controlling your calories. Now, what I mean by this is basically calorie control. When it comes down to it, if you don't eat more than your body needs, you're not going to put on weight. It's as simple as that. You could do the most crazy, outrageous bodybuilding routine in the world, which wouldn't be effective for strength, but you could still do it. And if you don't eat enough, you're not going to put on muscle mass. That's super, super straightforward. And you can see down here in this little diagram here, if you're looking at maintenance calories, so you're not looking at any change, you're basically consuming as many calories as you burn. Day to day, that's what you're doing. You're not going to see any change in muscle weight, in weight. However, if you're consuming more calories than you're burning, so you're eating more than your body needs, you're going to put on weight, whether it's fat, whether it's muscle, depending on your training. Or the other way, if you burn more calories than you consume, then you're going to lose weight. It's pretty straightforward, and it's really, you can get real complex on that, but that's pretty much universal. So what you need to be doing is you need to be balancing out how much food you're taking in with your energy requirements. Now, as a mountaineer, ideally, you probably don't want to be in a calorie deficit, meaning you're losing weight. You don't want to be doing that because that's going to be impacting your endurance training, your performance, and your recovery, because you're probably doing a huge amount more training than your strength training. So you don't want to be there, but you also don't want to be risking putting too much on, because then you might be getting that extra kilos. So you really, really want to be maintaining that neutral energy balance. And this is a little bit tricky, understandably. So what I highly recommend, if you are in this situation, if you don't know anything about nutrition, if you don't know how to balance your calories, you don't know how to work out how much you need to be taking in, or you have a history of really putting on a huge amount of muscle for a small amount of work, and you really do struggle with that, please, please, please go see a sports dietitian. Get this sorted out for yourself. They'll teach you, they'll educate you, they'll give you a real good plan. Sports dietitian is well worth investing for a mountaineer. Might cost you couple of $100 for initial consultation, depending on who you see. That's an incredible investment for any mountaineer, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And if you do really, really want to be serious about getting super strong, so you can have the best performance on the mountain as you can, but not have any impact of weight gain or decrements in your performance, if you're just guessing, see a sports dietitian. So in conclusion, mountaineers need strength. You're mental. If you're not doing max strength training, you're missing out huge performance benefits on the mountain. You 100% need it. To best develop strength, you want to be incorporating high load training in some way in your preparations. If you don't know where to be incorporating it, check out my other video around periodization of strength training, which gives you a few different options around how you can incorporate max strength training into your prep so it best aligns with your mountain goals. You can get strong without putting muscle. It's mental to say that you cannot. And if anyone tries to tell you that weight training will make you put on muscle, direct them to this video and you can explain exactly how you can without putting on muscle. You need to listen to science and not hearsay. Anyone in the strength and conditioning world, anyone with any type of athletic training performance who is halfway researched and halfway educated will tell you that this is absolute truth. So many people who don't really understand much about human physiology, much about strength and conditioning, will think of these training myths and they'll pass it around. But anyone who's done any education will be able to tell you this. You can get strong without putting on muscle. Follow these principles and you will be able to do it. I 100% guarantee you. If you want to learn more about this, you do have any questions, if you want to go into anything more detail, or if you want to, argue with me, which occasionally I get, you can reach out to me at rowan@summitstrength.com.au. I'm always happy to chat. Alternatively, if you do need help with your preparations, if you do need help putting together a strength training program for your mountain trip, if you do need help just with your entire training and entire preparations, look me up at Rowan at www.summitstrength.com.au. This is exactly what I do, training hikers, trekkers, and mountaineers for their adventures every single day. And if you really want to get it ready for your adventure, that's where you want to go. So I really hope you've enjoyed this video lecture today, guys. I hope you dealt with me rambling on a little bit, but hopefully you got a good insight into how you can get strong without putting on weight, and we can put that myth to bed. So have a lovely day, and we'll talk to you very soon. Bye.